home that are watching the media on TV or on the internet, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Ms. Domboski?
Present.
Mr. Croft?
Here.
Mr. Evans?
Here.
Mr. Flynn?
Happy Valentine's Day.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Honored to be here.
Mr. Trainee?
Present.
Mr. Steele?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Starr?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Do we have a quorum?
Madam Clerk, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Ms. Penny, would you come to the podium and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Trainee, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes, Madam Chair.
Item 4A, B, C.
These are the three meetings, A, B, and C, on the agenda.
Thank you.
November 1st, 4th, and 15th.
Right, and we have a second. Ask unanimous approval. Seeing no objection, those minutes are approved. Mr. Mayor.
Just, Madam Chair, that if you drive by the Northern Lights Inn on the way home tonight, you take the detour, you'll be appreciative.
Thank you. Thank you. Yay. That's really good news. That's really good news for all of us. The Assembly Chair has nothing to report. Committee reports. I'd like to start Mr. Weddleton.
Well, just briefly, you will be hearing a lot of comments from the Community and Economic Development Committee, the busiest committee in the Assembly, and thanks to all the staff that's been there all those times and for the committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Starr.
Oh, the audit committee met and reviewed the AWW audits. It was a well-attended meeting. I think we made some good illustrations on where there perhaps could put some extra attention on all of that, as well as some good feedback from that group. So I urge approval of those or acceptance of those. And thank you, Mr. Trainee, for your committee of the whole meeting. Not certain there needs to be a briefer on that, but thank you for putting it together our community for the McDonald Center review. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no committee report, but I was wondering if I could have a moment of personal privilege.
Certainly, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of weeks ago, a former longtime municipal employee, Greg Moyer, passed away down in Oklahoma. And Greg's worked over 20 years here at the municipality. He was the clerk for several years, and he also entered as ombudsman, I believe. And I happen to know Greg because I coached Little League baseball with him for the first 3 years that I was involved with New Naka Valley Little League. And here it is 16 or so years later, and I'm still involved with New Naka Valley Little League because of some of the things that I learned from Greg those first 3 years. And so I would certainly appreciate it if we could stand and have a moment of silence.
Certainly, Mr. Peterson. I'd like to just add a few comments to that. Greg Moyer was a friend of mine, and I've known him for many, many, many years. Not only was he ombudsman, he was the clerk, and he was also my supervisor when he ran the Assembly's Budget and Legislative Services Office. And I talked to his son the other day, and they're going to have a memorial for him here in Anchorage, which is very appropriate sometime this spring. Mr. Trainee.
Madam Chair, I actually hired Greg Moyer as our ombudsman and as our clerk. He was my change agent. When I hired him as clerk, they said, he can't do that. He's never been a clerk. He did an excellent job as clerk and as ombudsman. Going to miss him.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you again, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Steele.
We're having an Enterprise Oversight Committee meeting Thursday. We're going to start it at 10:30, 10 to noon. We've got a little bit longer than normal. The Port of Anchorage is going to update their port modernization project, and ML&P is going to update the power pooling. I went to the press release or the press function over at South Central Power, and I'm really happy to see them moving forward with the power pooling. I think it's going to be a great benefit to everybody in this particular area, and I think it's going to set the example for statewide power pooling ultimately. Anyway, I'm really glad to see that happening.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a meeting set up for the 24th at 2:30. Rules Committee meeting on my little ordinance dealing with scrap metals, other things.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Dunbar, on the phone.
No report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. February 23, Thursday at 1:30, we'll have our regular AMATS Policy Committee meeting. And, Madam Chair, if I could just ask a question, I noticed we have a special assembly meeting scheduled for Friday afternoon. It wasn't clear to me in the email that I got what the subject is. Could you enlighten me?
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. I can't, but Mr. Falsey certainly can. Mr. Falsey, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have requested a special meeting to be called for the purpose of introducing two ordinances. We had two late-breaking items that would be best attended to at the April regular election. They are a ballot proposition to create a Turnagain Armed Police Service Area, which could help us with some of the challenges that we're experiencing with the troopers there. And second, to accomplish the expansion of the Girdwood Valley service area. They do not include within their boundaries now, for instance, the Winter Creek hand tram, and they would like to do some annual maintenance on that so they can be put into service this year. In the absence of a special meeting, we don't actually have time to get those items on top of the April ballot, the April election, so we'd have to call some special election or put them off to next year. So we are calling that special meeting just simply for the purpose of putting those items into the queue so we could have a later public hearing. And I'm looking at
Thank you, Mr.
Barbara
Falsey.
Jones.
Mr. Trainee.
Madam Chair, I anticipate that'll be a real quick assembly meeting. If it takes more than 10 minutes, it'll be a problem.
I have to agree.
time?
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Anything else, Mr. Flynn?
That was all.
Thank you,
No,
Mr.
no,
Flynn.
Eric, special meeting.
Friday?
Yes.
What time?
3:30.
About 3:30, I think, and it'll be about 10 minutes. No longer than that. It's just pro forma matter. Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Evans.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Croft.
No report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Ms. Dombowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's an item on the agenda tonight, item 9F3. I just like to make a disclosure. I don't think I have an issue. This is AR 2017-40, a resolution appropriating land sale revenues to the Anchorage Fire Department Service Area Fund. As I typically do, my husband's an Anchorage firefighter. I don't think this is one of the items that the Board of Ethics has even said I need to do a disclosure on. But in the abundance of caution, I would just like to say he is a member of IAFF Local 1264 and a member of the Anchorage Fire Department.
Thank you, Ms. Dombowski.
Madam Chair, can I make one more request?
Certainly, Ms. Dombowski.
Item 2017-36, it's Mr. Flynn's drone ordinance that's to be introduced. This drone issue came up last year when we had interference with a fire that was going on. And I had recommended at that time that the Assembly start proactively looking at drone things. So I'm thrilled Mr. Flynn has taken the initiative. But I think this could also be a more substantive discussion. So I think this is an issue that, not to slow down Mr. Flynn's ordinance, because I think it's a great starting point, but I think the Community Economic Development Committee should also look at that particular ordinance and see what further steps we might need to take or additional steps. I know the Valley has done some substantial drone ordinances out there, so I think that committee would be a good committee to look at, to just evaluate.
Thank you, Ms. Dombowski. We will also have a Rules Committee meeting on that subject matter. Thank you. We certainly will, Mr. Flynn. No. Now you know. Okay, Mr. Trainee, can I have a motion to incorporate the addendum to the agenda, please?
Move to incorporate the addendum to the agenda, to the regular agenda, and the laid on the table items, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. May I have a second, please? Thank you. Addendum to the agenda. Item 9B4, AR 2017-56, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving the conditional continuation of the contract retroactive to be effective as of January 1st, 2017 for management services with Fire Lake Arena, Inc. for operation and management of the Harry J. McDonald Memorial Center. Also, there's an AM 146-2017 and an AIM 24-2017. Item 9D32, Assembly Memorandum 147-2017, Asset Retirement Obligation Investment Fund Board appointments. Item 9F18, summary of economic effects for Ordinance AO 2017-29. Item 9F20, AO 2017-31. AM 156-2017, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 1020, relating to record keeping and reporting requirements and other requirements for scrap metal dealers and dealers of precious metals, and amending the municipal silver fine schedule. Item 9F21, AO 2017-32, an ordinance amending the zoning map and approving the rezoning of approximately 13.7 acres from R4S1 multifamily residential mixed-use district with special limitations per AO 2009-39 to R4S1 with different special limitations for Ridgeport Subdivision Tract 1, generally located at the northwest corner of the intersection of O'Malley Road and Lake Otis Parkway in Anchorage. There's also a memorandum 145-2017. Item 9F22, Resolution 2017-57, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $5 million of Area-wide Fund 101 balance to Area-wide Fund 101 Office of Chief Fiscal Officer and $750,000 of Solid Waste Disposal Fund unrestricted net position to the Solid Waste Disposal Fund 562 Solid Waste Services, all for settlement of Eklutna versus Municipality pending in the Alaska State Court. There's also a memorandum AM 148-2017. Item 9F23, AO 2017-33, an ordinance authorizing a three-year lease with one 5-year option to extend between the Municipality of Anchorage and ACS of Anchorage for premises located at 182 Lindblad Avenue, Girdwood, Alaska, for police business office space. There's also an AM 149-2017. Item 9F24, Resolution 2017-15, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating funds for the Anchorage Water Utility and Anchorage Wastewater Utility 2017 capital budgets. There's also an AM 150-2017. Item 9F25, AR 2017-59, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating an amount not to exceed $1,300,000 of Fire Service Area Fund balance to Fire Service Area Fund and an amount not to exceed $200,000 of Area-wide General Fund balance to Area-wide General Fund, all within the Anchorage Fire Department 2016 operating budget commensurate with anticipated 2016 expenditures. Item 9F26, AO 2017-34, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing the borrowing and accepting from the State of Alaska Clean Water Fund an aggregate amount not to exceed $13,525,600 for the purpose of financing a portion of 15 AWW capital improvement wastewater projects and providing for related matters. There's also a memorandum 152-2017. Item 9F27, AO 2017-35, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing the borrowing and accepting from the State of Alaska Drinking Water Fund an aggregate amount not to exceed $5,155,000 for the purpose of financing a portion of 8 AWW capital improvement water projects and providing for related matters. There's also Assembly Memorandum 153-2017. Item 9F28, Resolution 2017-60, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $835,197 from the 2017 Maintenance Operations Department Equipment Maintenance Internal Service Operating Fund unrestricted net assets account to the 2017 Equipment Maintenance Internal Service Capital Fund to purchase replacement vehicles and equipment. Item 9F29, AO 2017-36, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 15.20, to include certain unauthorized operation of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAV, and drones over private property and the enumeration of prohibited public nuisances and providing for a potential amendment to Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 14.60, to provide confiscation as an additional penalty for repeat offenses. There's also an AM 155-27. Laid on table items 13A, Ordinance 2017-11, Information Memorandum, Chuyak Eagle River Advisory Board Resolution regarding Anchorage Assembly Ordinance AO 2017-11. Item 14M, AO 2017-14, an Information Memorandum, additional public comments regarding Anchorage Assembly Ordinance AO 2017-14, Planning and Zoning Case Number 2016-105. Ask unanimous approval to incorporate the addendum and the laid on table items into the agenda, and I don't see an objection. Mr. Dunbar?
No objection.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Those items are incorporated. Now, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. And before we approve the consent agenda, let's see if anyone has anything to pull. And I will start with you, Mr. Dombrowski.
9 Alpha 3 for reading.
9 Alpha 3. Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Mr. Croft.
9 Delta 24.
9 Delta 24. Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Evans.
9 Alpha 2.
9 Alpha 2. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Flynn.
9 Alpha 4.
9 Alpha 4. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trainee.
9F6. Does not need a public hearing, Madam Chair. So we need
Thank you. 9F6. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Steele.
No items, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No items this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Starr.
No items.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Weddleton.
Nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Dunbar.
No items.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I need to pull A1 for reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Nothing else to be pulled. Let's vote on the remaining items on the consent agenda. Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
Okay, that's okay. Those items are approved. We are now at agenda item number 9A1, AR 2017-53, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly honoring Becky Weaver for 17 years of exemplary public service. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Motion
Move to approve.
Thank you. May I have a
Second.
second? Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, that item is approved.
Resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly honoring Becky Weaver for 17 years of exemplary public service to the municipality of Anchorage. Whereas Becky Weaver began working for the municipality in 1999 and was promoted to progressively higher level positions before officially retiring as a senior administrative officer in the Treasury Division of the Finance Department in October of 2016. And whereas Becky proved herself as a highly involved and valued member of the SAP team, member from the very start of the project, and she was often recognized as a top performer for her high-quality work on the accounts receivable and cash management modules. And whereas Becky's high level of inquisitiveness, self-motivation, work quality, and work ethic, organizational skills, and tech-savvy nature greatly served the municipality during her career as a city employee and as an SAP team member. Whereas Becky set the bar for smoothest possible transition by leaving her successor through an immaculate documentation of both her core job and her 5 years of time invested in the SAP project. And whereas Becky and her husband, Ben, both having entrepreneurial aspirations, decided to purchase a successful longtime local retail store, i.e. Habitat Housewares, during the second half of 2016, and as a result, Becky decided to retire from the municipal employment and give her maximum attention to small business ownership. Whereas this recognition for Becky's distinguished service at the municipality was postponed several months following her official retirement date in deference to the major holiday retail season during the fourth quarter of 2016, and the gift exchange and inventory counting periods that followed in December and January. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly resolves that Becky Weaver is recognized and honored for her significant contributions during her 17-year career with the municipality and for her service and dedication to the municipality and citizens of Anchorage. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 14th day of February 2017.
Okay. So Dan tells me I have to say something.
Yeah, you do.
What an honor to be recognized in this way so publicly.
It's okay, Becky. I try to.
Well, if you've been on the project, you know why. You know, it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and we're proud of what we did. So,
And we thank you for your service and for all the work on the SAP project, Becky. We really do, and we wish you well on your retirement.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm happy to say that we bought a local business, so we're staying right here in Anchorage, of course, and it's been great. So,
What's the business so we can all visit you?
Habitat House Fares, the University Center, and we're going to move to Diamond Center.
That's
so,
great. That's great.
But yeah, it's been fun, and most of what I miss is in this room. So,
Thank you.
Be sure and leave your phone number so we can get a hold of you when we start having trouble with this.
yeah. Well, Dan's already worked on that.
Start down here now.
Is it official? So I'll be back for 32 hours during the month of February to provide some support.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, you guys.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mrs. Jill. We are now at agenda item 9A2, AR 2017-54, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and celebrating February 2017 as Black History Month. Mr. Evans.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, Mr. Dunbar? No objection?
No objection.
Thank you. That item is approved. The clerk's office, on my behalf, made some phone calls to several folks and asked you to be here this evening, so I would like for everybody who was called, and if you're here in the audience, please join me at the podium.
Whereas African American History Month had its beginning in 1926 when noted African American historian Dr. Carter G. Woodson initiated Negro History Week in an effort to raise awareness about the contributions of African Americans throughout American history and thereby deepen our collective understanding of our history. And whereas African American History Month celebrates the well-known heroes as well as the countless other men and women who have had a profound historical impact, yet whose names are largely unknown, such as the three pioneering African American women memorialized in the recent movie Hidden Figures: mathematician Catherine Goebel, aspiring engineer Mary Jackson, and acting supervisor Dorothy Vaughan. And whereas the Anchorage Assembly honors the accomplishments of African Americans in public and community service who have made and continue to make innumerable contributions to the growth and strength of the state of Alaska, a non-exhaustive list includes Betty Davis, the first African American elected to the Alaska State Senate, former Alaska State Representative, and current Anchorage School Board member. Blanche Louise Preston McSmith, the first African American to serve in the Alaska State House of Representatives. Melinda Taylor, the first African American to serve on the Anchorage Assembly. Larry Card, the first African American Superior Court judge. Dr. Joshua Wright, Alaska's first black dentist and former Anchorage School Board member and Alaska State legislator. Mahalia Ashley Dickerson, the first African American attorney in Alaska and the first African American president of the National Association of Women Lawyers. Vince Casey, a former executive director of the Municipality of Anchorage Equal Rights Commission. Jim Chase, executive director of the City of Anchorage Equal Rights Commission. Willard Bowman, the first director of the Alaska Human Rights Commission and a former Alaska State legislator. Macon Roberts, a former Anchorage School Board member. Pamela Scott Washington, the first female African American district court judge. Margot Bellamy, a longtime principal and the former director of the Office of Equal Opportunity at the Anchorage School District. Wanda Green, a former NAACP Anchorage president and current chair of the Anchorage Equal Rights Commission. Cal Williams, a community activist, former NAACP Anchorage president, and a performing historian. Celeste Hodge Groden, a former NAACP Anchorage president, former Director of the Municipality of Anchorage Office of Equal Opportunity and current Director of Shiloh Community Development. Jewel Jones, a longtime public servant and community activist, instrumental in shaping the municipal health system and advocating for services for low-income families, women, and minorities. John S. Parks, known as the unofficial mayor of Fairview, for his efforts to promote neighborhood infrastructure development and for crafting the first petition to create the People Mover public transportation system. Eleanor Andrews, known as a civic entrepreneur for inspiring institutions, businesses, and individuals to invest time, money, and energy into building a healthy, supportive community. And Elvie Gray Jackson, the first African American on the Anchorage Assembly to serve as chair. Whereas the Anchorage community is celebrating Black History Month with a variety of speakers, films, concerts, and events throughout February, including a weekly African American history series every Saturday in February from 1 to 2 p.m. at Fairview Recreation Center. Guest speakers will highlight the African Americans who contributed to Alaska history in the areas of the arts, sciences, technology, politics, and more. Black History Month events at UAA include films and speakers, a panel discussion, The Crisis in Black Education, and a soul food potluck and spoken word performance, and a Black History Month gospel concert on Saturday, February 18th, 2017 at 7 p.m. in the Performing Arts Center. Whereas the Anchorage Municipal Assembly joins the nation in remembering and celebrating the important discoveries and contributions made by African Americans in our country and in our community. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Anchorage Assembly that February 2017 shall be recognized and celebrated in the municipality of Anchorage as Black History Month. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 14th day of February 2017.
So whoever wants to speak, please. Yeah, please.
Thank you. My name is Ed Wesley, a long-term resident, and I'm here as the chairman of the Committee for Black History for the NAACP. I stand here before you in a cuspuk, and I'm wearing this to illustrate a point. Before I explain the benefits that is derived from me wearing it when I go out to conferences, I would like to share a short story. And the short story is about a U.S. senator who was running for office. There was a lady that invited him to her district, took him in the middle of the street, and asked him, "What do you see?" And he said he saw blighted buildings. He saw wrecks. He just saw a torn down neighborhood. And she said, "You cannot be my senator." And he asked her, "Why?" He said, "Because you have no vision." Our leadership, and especially here in the Anchorage Assembly and also our mayors, we must look at our diversity as an asset, not as a liability. And saying that, when I travel outside and I wear the cuspuk, many people come up to me and ask me about it. So I'm wearing it for two reasons. One, as a respect to the first Alaskans and their culture. But number two, it is a revenue generator for our state. Tourism is so important in our state. And so anytime we get an opportunity to go out and we represent our cultures, I think that's very, very important. So is it important when we have buy-in from the different cultures in our community. That gives them a sense of pride to this community and also the others who visit our community. So having said that, tomorrow, Senate Bill 46, that has been introduced by Senator David Wilson to honor the black engineers who built the Alaskan Highway. I would hope to see all of the Assembly people testify in support of this, of these veterans who, through their work, who had a mission for 18 months to build and connect the Alcan Highway. They did it in 8 months with ill equipment. And as a result of that work, the U.S. military was integrated because of that work. And this is the first time we're going to have that monument over in Centennial Park, given October the 25th, from now on, a recognition day for us. So thank you so much. Please.
Thank you very much. Ms. Taylor, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you so much, and all the members of the Assembly, for introducing this resolution. It is quite wonderful that you took it on your own to do this, and I appreciate it. Black, white, yellow, brown, whatever color you might be, you do need to know about all the histories that we have, and you need to know about all the people and what they do. And what I see here in Alaska is great, because we do recognize all people. We do. In most cases, we always do that. And I'm proud of the fact that I have lived in Alaska longer than I have anywhere else. And I think this place has been a great place for me to be. I got out of my sick bed to come here tonight. I couldn't even get my boots on or shoes on. I'm standing here now with a pair of my son's shoes on because there was nothing else in the house that I could wear. But I'm here, and I'm glad to be here. And I want to thank the audience for what you've done. And I'm proud of the fact that you have not only this on the agenda, but we got something else coming up on the agenda that's going to be very important. And I had planned to be here for that. And so thanks for inviting me. You didn't have to, because I was going to be here anyway. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Betty, for your service on the school board.
Thank you.
My name is Melinda Taylor, and I'm honored. I was honored to serve the people of East Anchorage for 6 years. I was honored to serve with Mr. Trainee. And I'd be remiss if I didn't personally thank you, LV, because when I first got elected, you were one of the people who mentored me. You had been in government for more than 2 decades, and you took a lot of time with me so I could learn the ropes to be a good Assemblywoman. So I'm deeply appreciative, and I'm deeply appreciative of your acknowledgement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Trainee?
Melinda, it's so great to see you in these chambers again.
No, thank you.
I remember way back when I think you were on the Assembly and I was asked to be appointed. I think I had a full beard on and jeans at that time. You took the chance to appoint me back to the Assembly. Thank you. I appreciate all you did.
Thank you so much.
Some don't, but I do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you very much. We are now at Agenda Item 9A3A, or 2017-51, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly to name the new wing in the Anchorage Museum Expansion Project in recognition to the Rasmussen family. Ms. Domboski.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, Mr. Dunbar?
No objection.
Thank you. This resolution is approved.
Mr. Croft's going to be presenting if someone's here to receive.
I don't know if anybody's here to receive it.
Going once. Is anyone here from the museum or the Rasmussen family?
Does anyone want to be here?
Well, may I
I'll go ahead and
suggest
read it.
that Mr. Croft, since he's standing in front of the podium, why don't you read that?
Could you read that?
Go ahead, Mr. Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Croft.
So they want a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly to name the new wing in the Anchorage Museum Expansion Project in recognition to the Rasmussen family. Whereas the Anchorage Museum is a public facility that benefits all residents of Alaska and visitors worldwide through their collections of art, history, and science exhibits. And whereas the museum is expanding with an addition of 25,000 square feet of new gallery space for the museum's art collection and exploration of art of the North, and whereas the Rasmussen family has supported the Anchorage Museum for decades since its founding, Elmer and Mary Louise Rasmussen were instrumental in the creation and growth of the museum because they were convinced of the benefits that a museum would bring to Anchorage and Alaska. And whereas the Rasmussen family have contributed $24 million to the New Wing expansion, and with their support, the addition to this public facility is being fully funded by private contributions, therefore not impacting taxpayers. And whereas the Anchorage Museum desires to honor the Rasmussen family for their consistent support of the facility and have worked with the public to establish support in this honorary naming, and whereas after following the established policy and performing due diligence, the Citizen Naming Panel voted unanimously to recommend that the new wing in the Anchorage Museum expansion project be named as the Rasmussen Wing. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly hereby resolves that the Anchorage Museum's new addition opening in September of 2017 be named the Rasmussen Wing to recognize that without the continued support from the Rasmussen family, this addition would not be possible.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Steele?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say, last week I was able to go through the new facility, and it's going to be fantastic. It's a huge space, and they've got great plans for it. So, good job, Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. We are now at agenda item 9A4, AR 2017-52, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly to name the Downtown Anchorage Transit Center in honor of John S. Parks. Mr. Flynn.
Madam Chair, it is my delight to move to approve.
Thank you. Thank you. Ask unanimous consent. Mr. Dunbar?
No objection.
Seeing no objection, this resolution is approved. Somebody's going to read it. Who's reading?
I am. Sorry.
Oh, great.
A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly to name the Downtown Anchorage Transit Center in honor of John S. Parks. Whereas John Parks moved to Anchorage in 1951 with his wife Geneva, and whereas John and Geneva did not have kids but worked to make everyone in their neighborhood of Fairview part of their family and tirelessly worked for the betterment of said neighbors, and whereas John advocated that all persons had the right to be represented in their community, no matter what color, age, gender, income, or religion, as represented by the work he did to register Anchorage residents to vote. And whereas John specifically worked to improve the quality of life for African Americans and for the Fairview community, which included but was not limited to working with local officials to improve roads, provide affordable housing, creating parks and recreation centers, expand the police force and libraries, and improving community relations. And whereas John was a staunch advocate for reliable and affordable public transportation, especially for the low-income residents of Anchorage, and worked towards both for creation of the People Mover system in 1974 and ensuring it provided quality transportation to those who needed it most. And whereas after following the established policy and performing due diligence, the Citizens Naming Panel voted unanimously to recommend that the Downtown Transit Center be named as the John S. Parks Transit Center. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly hereby resolves the Downtown Transit Center shall be known as the John S. Parks Transit Center to commemorate John Parks' dedication to a community that works for the betterment of all Anchorage residents and to add historical value to this essential aspect of our community. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 14th day of February 2017.
Thanks indeed to Mayor Ethan Berkowitz for impaneling this panel, and to Elvie Gray Jackson and the Assembly for going along with this mission and also putting 2 members on this panel. This panel consists of Chris Constance, Xavier Mason, Marcus Sanders. We were in panel more than a year ago, and we took on this task of informing the community, learning from the community. We told stories and we learned stories about John Parks, a man who spent many hours in this very room working for people yet unborn. The work that he did will benefit people of all races, colors, ages, economic status, genders, etc. This was a humble man, a carpenter, a man who worked with members of the NAACP, some of whom had master's degrees, but not John. Some of whom got a great deal of credit for what was accomplished, but not John. Jewel Jones told me that one time the Assembly gave John an award, and John said, "This is good, but the children can't eat it." John Parks worked diligently for young people, believed in them, would stop a kid walking on the block and tell him to straighten his life around. Tie up your shoes, shine your shoes, tie your necktie, present yourself well. He always presented himself well. You can see how dapper he was. Thank you indeed. Again, we don't honor John. He's long dead. But what we will do with this historical moment is forever make sure that young kids in this neighborhood, in this community, in this state know that in spite of the obstacles, in spite of their lack of education or with their education, they can always do more than they think they can do if they're doing it for others and for the glory of God. Thank you so very much. You have made this old man happy. God bless you.
Mr. Flynn.
Well, Mr. Williams and each of the members of the committee, thank you so much for your service. Obviously, Mr. Parks holds a special place in my heart, having grown up in the adjacent neighborhood and having the pleasure of representing Fairview for all these years. So thank you again. What a delight that you came up with such a wonderful choice to name the Transit Center for a man who is so dedicated to the people who need that service. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to make any comments before we move on? Okay. Okay.
Christopher Constant, as a member of this committee, it became really clear to me that there's an entire swath of Anchorage history that is untold, that there are a lot of people who need to be recognized, and that there's some work that this body can accomplish in finding out and how to tell that story. Because this is one important figure, and there are many more, and they'll be told.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say that I started working for the Assembly in 1988, February 2nd, and I had the honor of meeting John Parks on several occasions. He'd come into the office and and we'd have some really great conversations, and he was pretty happy when I was able to tell him, well, you know, I ride the bus, John. So I have some really good memories. Thank you. Okay.
I want to thank the panel for making this happen. This is a very big moment for me as being one of those young kids in Fairview who grew up in John Parks' house as one of the neighborhood kids and as an elder in our church, one who taught us how to read and how to write and how to respect ourselves and respect others. It's a big honor for years later to sit on this panel and to be able to honor him today. I just want to thank everybody for making this happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Xavier Mason. My words are going to be very brief. I never met John Parks. He passed away around the same time I was born. but his work still benefits me here today. And for that, I want to say thank you to the Assembly and to the men on this panel for making this day happen. So thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Ed Wesley, and I'm a past president of the NAACP, and that's where the initiative started to bring this forward. John was a past president, and for this month, there's 5 areas that we are recognizing, and John is one of the areas. Another one is in 1963, and John was there. 1963, there was a boycott on 13th and Gamble. And as a result of that boycott, there was a young man that was hired as a busboy. There was a demand that we have an African American or a black or a Negro at that particular time to work at Pop Cars. They hired a gentleman by the name of Richard Watts Jr. Richard Watts served 53 years at Cars, going on to be a vice president of groceries for the state. John S. Parks was a part of that boycott that took place on 13th and Gamble in 1963. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Regina Monteufel, and I'm the former vice president and beautification director of Fairview for many years. And he was very instrumental in getting me back into politics and to get active in the community. And, you know, I miss him. And I miss the way he got people active. And, you know, he never stuck his nose up to anybody in the community, no matter who they were. And, you know, I just, you know, if there was a crowd of people, he'd say, come on, well, you're not that active. Oh, no, now you are going to get back in this group. You know, we need everybody in this room to get active like he was, because it takes all of us to make it a good community. And it takes all of us to make changes. Perhaps we can get some buses looping through the city at night for the night workers. He would love that, to see that happen.
Thank you. Finally, I'd like to thank all of the people who came out tonight here participating in our government, and I'd like to thank all of the people who participated in the 3 public hearings that we had, those who are watching in on television, and those who have prayed for this mission. Thanks indeed. It was certainly a full community effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are now at agenda item 9D24, Assembly Memorandum 132-2017, sole source contract with Mantech Mechanical to install the replacement ice rink refrigeration system at the Dempsey Anderson Arena. Mr. Croft.
I'll move to approve, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Croft?
Yeah, so I declared a conflict on a similar item before. This item was negotiated by my wife's senior partner at Burkhart Croft. So it was Blaise Burkhart who negotiated it, but it does have a financial impact, a significant one on their business, and I'd ask to be excused from voting.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. I'm sorry. So used to, it's usually Mr. Flynn. Mr. Croft, you are excused. Thank you.
Is there already a motion on this one?
Yeah, there was a first and a second. So we're now going to vote. Let's vote on the board, please. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Thank you. That item is approved. We are now at agenda item 9F6, AR 2017-42, a resolution appropriating $100,000 from the Anchorage Bowl Parks and Recreation Service Area Fund to increase the capital reserve fund for future repairs at Bartlett, Diamond, East Service, and West Pools. Mr. Trainee.
Move to approve, Madam Chair. We just don't, on this item, we just don't need to have a public hearing on it. Because
Thank you. Thank you. If I can clarify that a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Starr, but this item was inadvertently put on a public hearing item, and it shouldn't be because it's $100,000 and not more. Anything more than $100,000 has to have a public hearing. And that's why Mr. Trainee pulled it. So we can vote on that. There was a first and a second. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
Thank you. That item is approved.
That completes those.
Mr. Starr?
Well, I didn't have a chance to study the topic, but I just, maybe Mr. Trainee can tell me why the Chugiak pool isn't part of the upgrade.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Trainee?
I do not have a reason for you, sir. You might ask administration. I don't know.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes, this is the 5 pools that are managed by the Anchorage Parks and Rec Service area. Chugiak Pool is managed by the Chugiak Eagle River Park Service area.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Thank you, Mr. Starr. We are now at Agenda Item 11A, AIM 2017 Internal Audit Report 2016. Mr. Trainee, do you want to appoint a personal privilege?
Personal privilege. Was anybody that here appointed to a border commission tonight? We had a whole bunch on there. Is anybody here that was appointed? Would you please come forward and identify yourself and tell us what commission you were appointed to? We appreciate your public service. So if you're appointed to a board of commission, please come up and identify yourself. Let us know which commission.
Good evening. I'm Lois Epstein, and I've been appointed to the Budget Advisory Commission.
You have lots of work to do, ma'am.
I know. I
That's
checked
a good
into it.
commission.
Thanks.
You'll have interesting times.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Hall, and I'm on the agenda as being appointed to the Women's Commission.
That was approved, ma'am.
Jana Weltzine, and I am on the agenda to be appointed to the Planning Board.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, ma'am.
We are now at Agenda Item 11A, Assembly Information Memorandum 1, 2017, Internal Audit Report 2016, Vendor Contracts Compliance, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility. Mr. Starr.
Move to accept.
Second.
Ask unanimous approval on accepting this, and I see no objection. Mr. Dunbar?
No objection.
This item is accepted. We are now at Agenda Item 11B, AIM 2, 2017, Internal Audit Report 2016, Vendor Contracts, Payments, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility. Mr. Starr.
Move to accept.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Starr.
No, both of these audits received a vetting, I guess you can call it, at the AWU headquarters. Thank you for those that showed up on the committee. And thank you to AWU for having your team there to respond and make the necessary changes. I think the extra attention that we heard will actually help. So all is well. I think it shows a good partnership between the legislative side and the executive branch kind of working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Trainee?
Madam Chair, I just want to thank Mr. Chadwick for the excellent job they're doing with these audits. It's nice to have somebody there we can appreciate your work. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. We're now at Agenda Item 11C, AM 73, 2017, Planning and Zoning Commission. Can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
In second, thank you. Okay, I ask unanimous approval of this item. Mr. Dunbar?
No objection.
Seeing no other objection, this item is approved. We are now on Agenda Item 11D, Assembly Memorandum 74, 2017, Planning Board Appointment. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Ask unanimous approval of this. Mr. Dunbar?
No objection.
Seeing no objection, this item is approved. Item 11E, Information Memorandum, AIM 131, 2016, Internal Audit Report 2016-05, Harry J. McDonald Memorial Center. Mr. Starr.
Move to accept.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Ask unanimous acceptance, and seeing no objection, Mr. Dunbar?
No objection.
Thank you. This item is accepted. Mr. Trainee, do you want to make a motion to take a break for dinner for 20 minutes?
Madam Chair, motion made to take a break for 20 minutes. Then we'll return. We have people under persons to be heard.
All right, could I have a second, please? Thank you. We're adjourned for 20 minutes. At agenda item 12A, appearance request, Ken McKay regarding segways on sidewalks and plowing the sidewalks. Are you here, Ken? Come on up to the podium, please. Hi, please state your name and spell your last, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
My name is Ken McKay.
Can you pick up that microphone and point it towards your, we're getting old. Thank you, sir.
Ken McKay.
Actually, if you put it on top of that, right, that would be perfect. Thank you.
I'm still Ken McKay.
Good.
MCKAY. I guess what I wanted to talk about most of what's concerning me is the sidewalks being plowed. And I've kind of taken it upon myself. I'm a pedestrian and I ride a bicycle. And I've kind of taken it upon myself to kind of do a little research on this and to look around a little bit and see what's going on. And I see some places that aren't being plowed at all. And I think I got it figured out. It's the big, wide, developed sidewalks that you can drive a pickup truck down. Those are nice. The sidewalk going into Earthquake Park. I live on a dead-end street. My street is perfect. It's real nice. He's plowed it 30 times. But if you try to get to DMV, the bank, the drugstore in Midtown, Northern Lights, Minnesota, that never gets plowed. It's not a developed sidewalk. It's one of the smaller sidewalks that you can't drive a truck down. Those C Street's terrible. From 15th to Fireweed, it snows. People drive on it for a couple days. Then the graders go through and they take all that hard jumbled ice and throw it up into the sidewalks. And they never plow it. I broke 2 ribs on the corner of Minnesota and Northern Lights and spent 4 days in the hospital. I'm disabled. So Medicaid and Medicare paid for that. $10,000. You could plow a lot of sidewalks for $10,000. And I'm probably not the only one. I see a lot of people on crutches. I see a lot of elderly trying to get to the drugstores to get their medications. We've been talking about the transit center. You get on a bus, you ride to the drugstore, they open the door. It's to my waist. You have to get off and climb up over this pile of hard pack ice that's been plowed up off. And I don't think that it's the fact that you need more. You need to reschedule the routes. Instead of plowing a dead-end street 30 times, plow it 10 times and then go plow Northern Lights. I'm thinking about buying a snowblower. I think that'd be fun. I'll do Northern Lights. You know, I mean, if we can't do it. But I think it would be very easy. C Street could be done in a half hour from 15th up to the bridge where you can't go no further. Put the grader on the sidewalk, lower the blade 4 miles an hour. How far is that? Like 2 miles or something? You can do it in a half hour. But they just blast past there. I see it over in Midtown where they go down Arrow instead of turning left where they do and doing the sidewalk across Milky Way over to Wisconsin. He shuts the blade off, gets on the road, drives over to the nice big wide sidewalk and goes down. They don't do the little skinny sidewalks for some reason. I don't understand why.
Thank you very much for being here, sir. There are no questions. Have a good evening. Mr. Neese, regarding legal review of initiatives AO 2000-213. Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thanks for working on Valentine's Day. I'm sure your spouses and significant others appreciate that. I'm here to speak on the initiative process. Mr. Trainee, I requested some reviews of some materials because you were the sponsor of that petition a long time ago. And,
not that long.
Your voice sounds the same, and Ms. Jackson's the only one that beats you on procedural things, because you were running the meeting and she was just blasting through today, so she's done very well. The U.S. Constitution gives you the right to petition your government. Your Alaska Constitution also names this in Article 1, Section 6. You have the right for initiative. A lot of debate in 59 about giving people the power to work against their government, for their government, or make law. In your Bill of Rights in the Anchorage Charter in 1975, when you created the municipality, it said, the Charter Committee writes to the people of Anchorage that are in addition to the rights guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Alaska. Among those rights guaranteed by this chapter are, number one, the right to initiative. Number one. So between 1975 and 2002, initiatives came into the municipal clerk's office. They said, I've got an idea. The clerk said, okay. They said, here's your start date. Go out, and they gave them the number of things. They didn't even provide a form. They went out and collected it. So when the father of the tax cap comes in front of you, he merely had to go in, register a start time, go out, connect the signatures, and bring it back in. And if he hit the magic number, then it was subject to legal review. They had 10 days. In 2002, medical marijuana came in on the early part of the year. It was rejected by the city. The taxi cab initiative came in. That was rejected by the city. Both of those ended up in court. And in late 2002, Mr. Trainee, you created an initiative, and it was to kind of formalize the process. I've used it a number of times. It's a great process. You come in, the city attorney looks at it, goes like, okay, this will fly, or hey, you need to go. It's kind of like a free editing service. It's a great procedure. It works very well. Yeah. Your problem is it hasn't prevented it going to the courts. So you had an initiative approved by your attorney that was taken to the courts. The court decided against your clerk and the municipal attorney, and now the process is kind of sitting there. It's missed the target for this year's election. But you, as assembly members, have a right to protect my rights as a person that is petitioning the government. I'd like to know if you are going to indeed put that on a ballot, if your municipal attorney and the mayor are going to take it up to the Supreme Court, or if you're going to have the people that wrote the original petition take it to the Supreme Court. All of those just put us right back where we were before 2002. The court is putting itself between the people and their right to petition the government. It doesn't matter if you like the petition, doesn't matter if you love the petition. What matters is the process. You made the hoops to jump to, Mr. Trainee. The people followed it. They got a legal opinion from your attorney. Your attorney defended that opinion in court. So the only thing between you doing your job and those people having that on the ballot this spring is one judge and 3 plaintiffs, and that's it. They had over 7,000 people that you represent sign that petition.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. We are now at agenda item 13A, continued public hearings, AO 2017-11, to establish a simplified method for determining base grade and allow construction in steep, slow areas to the same height standards as the underlying zoning district allows. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Good evening, sir. Please state your name and spell your last.
My name is Adam Lees, last name spelled L-E-E-S. I'm the chair of the Rabbit Creek Community Council, and I am standing in support of this resolution. We here at Rabbit Creek hear a lot of Title 21 because it very much affects the development in our area and very many problems that come around, especially with slopes being one of the more contentious ones. The resolution before you, 2017-11, seems to have addressed very many of our concerns, for which we thank both the Planning Commission and yourselves. We do have some concerns. One, we would like to see the purpose language in 21.7.23.1 returned. and the language maintained in a further subsection to maintain the engineering, as a good chunk of the hillside is beyond the building safety service area. Otherwise, the Hillside District Plan, which we do fight for, we want to make sure that it is enforced properly. This seems to take in the spirit to adapt development to the steep slope conditions of the hillside on a larger scale, and definitely to reduce the disturbance on any particular lot that could impact drainage negatively. With a 35-foot restriction maintained on height in place and a varied variety of methods for builders to determine their base, this seems to be a fantastic compromise. And though the Community Council couldn't officially vote to endorse or refrain from endorsing this, given our present positions, I do want to thank you because this comes very close to what we had requested.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members. My name is Katie Nolan, N-O-L-A-N. I was on the original committee that began work on the Hillside District Plan, or what eventually became the Hillside District Plan. And one of the things that we were working for was promoting responsible development of and responsible stewardship of the Anchorage Hillside. We wanted to create a document that would provide guidance into the future. Now, one of the unintended consequences of the new Title 21 was eliminating the possibility of creating a home style with a footprint that was recommended by the Hillside District Plan. This error mandated a much larger footprint on the properties, and what we wanted was a smaller footprint. It created a situation where you had to do a lot of cut and fill, which the Hillside District Plan asks that we not do. And we want to preserve the permeable surfaces that regenerate a healthy aquifer. Now, one of the things we appreciate is the way our Assemblymember Welton has worked tirelessly on this document to create something that works with the Hillside District Plan and for the development of the responsible development of the Anchorage Hillside. And I'm hoping for unanimous consent on this document. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I'm Eric Visser, V-I-S-S-E-R, owner of Visser Construction and board member for Anchorage Home Builders Association. I'm in favor of this ordinance personally, and we as a group are supportive of this ordinance as it pertains to more specifically the Class B zoning districts, meaning our 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I think ultimately what this is going to do for the residents of Anchorage is provide more design options for homes that they would like to build in those zoning districts, and ultimately allow us as builders to provide safe and affordable housing for our residents here in Anchorage. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Welcome.
My name is Brian Harten, H-A-R-T-E-N, and I work for a developer here in town. And I believe that something as messy as code rewrites that Title 21 has recently undergone, there's going to be no such thing as a perfect document. That said, I'm in support of this ordinance as written as a replacement for the language that's in Title 21 regarding building height restrictions. Not to say I wouldn't support further improvement on it, but as of right now, I like it. The height restriction of 25 feet that's written in Title 21 right now simply takes nearly every undeveloped hillside parcel off the table for development, with no consideration for the soils, the drainage, foundation design, or other factors that go into feasibility analysis for a building parcel. So it's simply an arbitrary height restriction without consideration of any of those other variables, to me, is unreasonable. And further consideration should be given to the fact that the current Title 21 restrictions, it goes counter to the Muni's current pursuit of pursuing multiple approaches to increasing the housing inventory in Anchorage. And to impose a code that takes hundreds of potential building lots off the table would have a financial impact on the municipality. in that the current tax revenue for raw land is just a fraction of what you see when it's fully developed, and that the current undeveloped parcel's value will drop almost to zero if it's designated undevelopable by code. The 3-story height restriction as written in this ordinance could still prevent development of some lots that could be developed with sound engineering, design, construction practices, but it's not as severe as the current limitation. So I trust that if a certain situation were to come up, we could still appeal to the departments through a variance request as is current practice. So that's my thoughts on the matter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jeremy Holloway from Eagle River. Everybody here so far has spoken in behalf of Anchorage Hillside. This does directly impact the 25-foot
Can you
restriction.
speak into the microphone so we can hear you?
The 25-foot restriction does directly impact many, many acres of undeveloped land in Eagle River. And most of Eagle River is on sloping ground. So I guess that's all I really have to say is that as far as economic and future development of lands, it burdens quite a bit of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening.
Hello, my name is John Rankin. I'm a
Can you spell your last name, please, sir?
R-A-N-K-I-N.
Thank you.
I'm a designer of houses. I've designed hundreds of them. And for the last 30 years, I've been specializing in slope houses, slope lots up on the hillside. I've been working from the beginning on trying to get some of this rolled back on the Title 21. An example, this picture they used for this diagram here is one of my houses. On the 25-foot situation where no part of the structure can be greater than 25 feet above the existing grade, this walkout ranch could not be built. It could not be built. As far as the height restrictions go, there's restrictions and then there's being prohibitive. That particular one is totally prohibitive and should be stricken from the code. Now, the 3-story height requirement is a good thing. I mean, it gives a compromise to the people that are bothered by thinking they're going to get a 45-foot house. But it really creates some, the 35-foot height restriction creates problems when you need some flexibility. If you use a 9-foot basement, 10-foot main floor, 9-foot second floor with a roof, chances are you're going to go over your 35 feet. So we need leeway on that. The 3-story situation is good. I don't think anyone's going to do a 45-foot tall house. And there's really no need to do we've all along we've had to, we've been given the opportunity to do without structural engineering on 8-foot or 13-course block homes. And if it exceeds that, then we have to get into engineered foundations. There's no need to arbitrarily do engineered foundations on every job. I've been doing it, as I say, for over 30 years. I've never had a failure. And I have well over 40 houses, about 40% of the houses in Providence Point I designed. So I have a track record there. And I'm very, very much in favor of this. So that's about all I have to say.
Well, thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening. Hi.
Hi, this is Ron Thompson, THOMPSON, here representing HBA and myself, and just wanted to say a couple different things with regard to this ordinance. This is kind of how an ordinance should be created, I think, in this industry, which is working together, the industry working with the municipal staff over several months. This has been an ongoing process, I think, this ordinance for about 6 months. So it's actually a very good piece of legislation. The only item that I think that needs to be changed is the one last item that talks about engineering. Engineering is covered in the state statute. There's no reason to put engineering for structural design in the land use codes. That piece, I think, is left very clear in the state statutes for engineering, and we figured that the language that is existing in the zoning code, Title 21, is more than adequate and covers all of Anchorage, not just the Eagle River, not just the outside the land use, outside the ABSSA, all of those pieces. It makes sense to leave this ordinance in place moving forward. It clears up a lot of issues with regard to what we're doing. But I did want to thank, again, Terry Schoenthal and Hal Hart have been a huge help with discussing issues that work with the industry, and I think it's a nice start, and I think it should go into other areas besides just Title 21. But at this point, I wanted to make sure that it was aware that they've spent a great deal amount of time on this with the industry, and we've come to a solution that should work very well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Madam Chair, Assembly members, my name is Chuck Holman, H-O-M-A-N. I reside in Eagle River and am a general contractor engaged primarily in residential remodeling, additions, and custom homes. In general, I am in support of this ordinance. It would have been nice if they would refer to the Chugach Eagle River Comprehensive Plan, and seem to kind of ignored that area of the city. But the provision, like the previous speaker, about the engineered foundations and targeting one specific area, it'd be more appropriate that's in Title 23, and the Title 23 is our building code, and we are required already to build to the code as adopted by this body, and to be putting building codes in Title 21, our land use ordinance, seems inappropriate. One thing, currently with our ordinance the way it is, doing remodeling, people that have a home that is, if you fail to pass this tonight, there's a lot of existing homes that will be non-conforming. And when they want to build an addition on that home, they'll be prohibited from making alterations to that home, being in a non-conforming situation. So passing this is important to address that issue. And then in the outlying areas, the vast majority of new construction is inspected by International Code Council certified building inspectors. And most of the new homes in Eagle River are inspected at a much less cost, because we're using combination dwelling inspectors, and one inspector does the plumbing, electrical, mechanical, and framing all in one visit, where when the city inspector comes out in the Anchorage Bowl, you have 3 separate people to perform those inspections. And so the cost in Anchorage is much greater to accomplish the same code compliance inspections. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Karen Kasich-Michelson. I'm Vice President of Anchorage Homebuilders Association. And we've had a lot of people speak to you tonight in favor of this ordinance. I'd like to thank all of you for listening to us and ask you to please continue to be open-minded and act timely to our industry's concerns and requests for future changes of Title 21. We have been working continuously with Terry Schoenthal, Hal Hart, John Weddleton, thank you very much for all of your help. And they've been very open-minded and attentive to hearing the issues that we have as an industry and helping us work through them and to get to reasonable results through ordinance changes. I also wanted to tell you we have the support of Bill Taylor with Colony Homes, who couldn't be here tonight, and Paul Michelson, who couldn't be here tonight. We've worked very hard to make this happen, and we're very appreciative of all the support we're getting, and just wanted to say thank you again.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second. Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Madam Chair, there are 3 amendments, and I'd like to move the first amendment, which you should have in front of you.
Second.
Thank you. This amendment is, I forget which one this was. Oh, this one would change the proposal that we have in front of us. Would require that professional engineers only would design the foundations in some situations. And we chose to return the wording to existing wording, which would allow professional engineers, architects, or other qualified professionals. And that's where we've been for some time. And it's been working, but it is an important issue, as some of the people speaking this evening mentioned. So we'd like to address this as a separate issue so it doesn't hold up the bigger package, which has a need to get approved tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, I actually have a question about a different piece of the ordinance, but if I'm reading this correctly, it refers to page 5, lines 11 through 14. But I am not sure that's correct. I think it's 40 through 45.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay. So if there's no such thing as a friendly amendment, so I'll move to amend the amendment to say page 5, lines 40 through 45, as opposed to 11 through 14.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Croft?
I just wanted to put a conflict on the record. As we discussed earlier, my wife's an architect. She does primarily commercial and school, some other work, fire stations. She's done not residential, almost. I don't think she's ever done any residential, and I don't believe this has any significant impact either way, but it does affect architects. So I just wanted to disclose that to the...
I appreciate that. The chair rules that you don't have a conflict. Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Mbosky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Mr. Weddleton indicated, this language effectively would just, it would reject the changes requested, and it would continue existing code in which basements are engineered they're approved by qualified professionals, whether it be engineer, architect, or other qualified professional. The Chugiak Eagle River Advisory Committee, most of you have seen, it was laid on the table, item 13A4. Though they recommended completely striking this section, effectively the result is the same thing. The result is they wanted to keep existing code. So this would be consistent with the Chugiak Eagle River Advisory Board's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mbosky. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote on Mr. Weddleton's amendment number 1. Mr. Dunbar.
Actually,
I'm sorry?
We have to do the amendment first.
Madam Chair, I'm on the line as well.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. We're voting on Mr. Flynn's amendment to change the line numbers. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Thank you. That amendment is approved. We are now at the main motion, amendment number 1, Mr. Weddleton's amendment. Please vote. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Thank you. Amendment number 1 is approved. Mr. Weddleton?
On the, Mr. Domboski, do you want to speak on this one and make the motion?
Madam Chair, I move amendment number 2, and it will add, it'll add language at on page 5, I believe lines 18 through 20. I'll have to double check. But effectively, let me check before I say it, because now Patrick's probably going to get me. Actually, it is going to be, okay, it is wrong. I would like to amend page 6, lines 2 to 3, it's where it's going to be, and it is going to say, in all Class B zoning districts where option B, code site, is used to establish the grade plane, structures are limited to 3 stories on the downslope side, except those areas governed by Chapter 10 where the number of stories is not limited, And that's my amendment. If I can get a sec. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. So the purpose of this is the Hillside District Plan, as it was referenced earlier. One of the issues that was very significant in the Chugiak Eagle River Advisory Committee meeting, and I have to tell you there was probably 50 members of the public that were in attendance. Would you say that's about right, Dave? It was a packed room. And there was great offense taken to the fact that there was all references to the Hillside District Plan and no references to the Chugiak Eagle River Comprehensive Plan. And this part of the change, limiting structures to 3 stories is not endorsed at all by the Chugach Eagle River community. And so what this effectively does is it just lets the underlying zoning rule. So there's no changes to height or anything like that, but we're not limiting the development in our area to 3 stories. It's limited by the underlying zoning district, which is already existing in code. So I just want to make that very clear that this is the reason we have Chapter 10. It's to reflect our community's desires and goals as we develop and move forward. So I would appreciate support.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Weddleton?
I just inform the body that this was discussed and recommended approval by the Community and Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. We are now voting on Mr. Weddleton's amendment number 2. And Ms. Domboski's amendment number 2. Please vote. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Thank you. That amendment is,
Can you please reflect me as a yes vote?
thank you. That amendment is approved. Okay, Mr. Weddleton.
I'd like to move Amendment 3.
Do we have a second, please? Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Amendment 3 restores the intent language that was recommended for deletion. And I think intent language is helpful for people to make decisions where there might be a little gray area in a project that may come up. And it's also, this particular intent language was used to support positions for both builders and the community. So it's something that's very useful to be in there. And many of the changes we made are directly connected with this intent language.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Flynn?
I hate to be the editor-in-chief tonight, but I think once again we have the wrong line numbers. I think it's lines 33 through 38 on on page 5, and if Mr. Weddleton thinks I'm correct, I'll make the motion to make the amendment.
You are right. Thank you.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Thank you. Mr. Croft?
No, on the underlying amendment, not on the.
Okay, thank you. Please vote on Mr. Flynn's amendment to change it to read page 533, lines 33 to 38. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
That amendment is approved. We are now at the main amendment, number 3. Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Croft, did you want to comment?
I guess I just wanted to ask then, what was the purpose for deleting it? Was there any stated purpose? It seems good language. Why was it deleted in the first place? Do you know?
I'm not aware.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you. I think it'd be helpful to have Dave, since we're amending some of the amendments on the floor, if you could just come up and speak to Mr. Croft's question about why we originally took that language out. Or not we, why it was originally taken out.
Dave Whitfield, Municipal Planning Department. The language that was deleted, unfortunately, I did not draft the ordinance, and I'm not sure why it was deleted. If it were up to me and I was writing the ordinance, I would not remove that language. So I do agree with Mr. Weddleton. I would keep that language in.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. There is no one else in the queue. We're voting on Mr. Weddleton's amendment number 3. Please vote. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Thank you. That amendment is approved. We are now at the main motion. AO 2017-11. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for either Mr. Weddleton or Ms. Domboski. On page 3, example B, I think there may be a typo. The elevation estimate on the right side of that figure should not, I think it should be 15 feet, not 5 feet.
I could clarify that.
Okay.
That's actually just indicating that that measurement would be taken 5 feet away from the building.
Okay, that's all. That's the only question I had. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll just say I really appreciate the committee's work, and particularly Mr. Weddleton's work on this issue. Ms. Domboski brought it to our attention a while back. We worked to come up with a stopgap, and and turned it over to you to do the hard work, and you've done yeoman's work in getting this done. So thank you for that. I think all of us should be appreciative of the efforts that you have undertaken, and particularly somebody who avoids Title 21 like the plague. I appreciate your willingness to take it on.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Weddleton?
I'd like to speak maybe at length on this. You give me the hook if I go too long, but I have been involved with this quite a bit of time through the Hillside District Plan and others, and partly to apologize to people in Eagle River. In fact, I guess I speak to what I know, and mostly being involved with the Hillside. The backup largely came from Hillside District Plan and so on, because that's where I've been involved. But I know staff didn't forget you like I did, and I think with Ms. Domboski on the committee, she straightened that out and was very good, and it's good education for me. So don't feel slighted, and if you do, I apologize. From a Hillsider's view, when we were doing the Hillside District Plan, you can go up to some sections of the hillside and you can see beautiful homes and some that aren't quite so beautiful. And sometimes you can look up and you can see the back of a, towering, a huge tower of T111 with a porch on stilts. It's just not attractive. And the community, through the Comprehensive Plan and Hillside District Plan and even the Chugach Eagle River Plan, addresses this to say these views are important to the community. And that's where these building design standards come from. But at the same time, we want beautiful homes on the hillside. We want to be able to use those lands and not restrict that. So when we worked for this, that's what we were working for, kind of both the practical and the aesthetic. And I think we found a very good balance there. And I would thank the people of the home builders, Karen Michelson was very active in that, Ron Thompson, and the staff, Terry Schoenthal and Hal Hart and others. It's been a real good experience. We worked through it very, very carefully, and that was important. We addressed it very, very carefully at the Community and Economic Development Committee, and appreciate everyone's work on that. We got to a better product from that work yesterday. So recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make a quick comment. We did, as Mr. Flynn indicated, though he has a great passion and zeal for Title 21, we did deal with this last year, and it was it was one of those issues, the home builders in discussion with them and the department, we knew this was going to be an issue, and we did for a year basically deal with the issue, and we knew we had to come back and readdress it, and this isn't going to be the last time. And the reason I bring this up is because Title 21 is one of those documents that I remember Ms. Osiander sitting on this body and saying it's not perfect. We know it's not perfect, but we will have a quick mechanism in order to vet and problem solve issues, and we will get it through really quickly because we don't want to lose a building season, right? That's what it came down to. And so this was a method that we used this time. It wasn't fast necessarily. Last year's solution was fast. It saved a building year, but it was the stopgap that Mr. Flynn talked about. Last year's mechanism, by doing that, we were able to get to a long-term solution. So I appreciate Mr. Weddleton and Karen and the home builders and, of course, the department's collaboration to get this done. I want to point out, though, the Chugach Eagle River Advisory Board is actually established in code, and it's made up of all the community councils in Chugach Eagle River. And I want to tell you, this is why this was so important. Every single community council had a representative present, and the entire room was full of Chugach Eagle River residents when it came to Title 21 issues. And so we had a couple of big issues on the agenda, but it was full. So Chugach Eagle River takes land use very seriously, and they spent years developing Chapter 10. So anytime there's an issue in Chapter 10, it's why I was so passionate at our committee meeting that it was so important to not bypass that committee and actually engage the community, because we have people on that board that have been engaged for 20 years in Chugach Eagle River, and they really know these issues well. And I think that was demonstrated. Jeremy and Elma were there, Chuck was there. A lot of the residents from my community that are here tonight sat through there, and they knew these issues. And so I just want to thank the body for allowing this to be postponed one meeting so we could get their input, because I think that's good public process. And I just want to thank the committee, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Traney, Mr. Weddleton, for your unwavering support of that process, and we are very appreciative. So I will be enthusiastically supporting this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. I'm going to echo what you just said to some extent. But anyway, for those who don't know, this Community and Economic Development Committee, it's an assembly committee. Mr. Weddleton is the chair, Ms. Dombrowski is a member, Mr. Peterson is a member, and Mr. Trainey is a member, and ex officio members from the Planning and Zoning Commission, Tony Kange and Brandon Spurhouse. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And I just want to say, I'm so grateful to have this committee. You guys are so thorough, and you do really great, great work on behalf of the public. And as the chair, I try to attend all committee meetings, but you just meet too early for me. So anyway, thank you very much. There's no one else in the queue. We're voting on the main motion. Please vote. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
That item is approved. We are now at agenda item 14A, AR 2017-17, confirming and levying assessments for the sewer special improvements within levy upon connection, Roll 16S2. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Approve, Madam Chair.
Thank you. May I have a second, please? Thank you. There's no one in the queue. Please vote. Here we go. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
May have lost him.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That item is approved. We are now at agenda item 14B, AR 2017-18, confirming and levying assessments for the water special improvements within levy upon connection, LUC Row 16-W-2. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Thank you. There's no one in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Who's missing? Thank you. That item is approved. We are now at agenda item 14C, AR 2017-29, a resolution appropriating $2 million of unrestricted net position from the Port of Anchorage for Phase 2 of the Anchorage Port Modernization Program. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Thank you. No one in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
That item is approved. We are now at agenda item 14D, AR 2017-33, a resolution appropriating $68,845 lease revenue for payment of principal and interest in an interfund loan for the Eagle River Town Center. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There is no one in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
That item is approved. We are now at agenda item 14E, AO 2017-16, authorizing the disposal by perpetual non-exclusive electrical easement to Chugach Electric Association on a portion of Heritage Land Bank Parcel 3-041. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Mr. Peterson and Mr. Trainey second. No one in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
That item is approved. We are now at agenda item 14F, AR 2017-34, a resolution appropriating $190,549 for aerial roadway dust control. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. I was remiss in not asking this question ahead of time. My standard question, Mr. Abbott, does the funding in this TORA actually cover our costs?
Yes.
I'm leaving soon.
Should we put that on the wall?
For the rest of you, watch out for this. you will get shafted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Flynn. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
That item is approved. We are now at agenda item 14G, AR 2017-35, appropriating $500,000 as a grant from the Bloomberg Philanthropies to the miscellaneous operational grants to create an innovation team. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? Thank you. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Abbott's over here, but maybe somebody can answer the question for me. I assume no. I'm just a tiny bit familiar with this grant, but not totally. Is there any obligation in the future for any sort of municipal contribution, or is this just a straightforward grant?
It is just a straightforward grant. There is no municipal commitment associated with this.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott.
Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
That item is approved. Before we move on, I was just advised that item 14B, I think it was, had a substitute version, and I overlooked it. So now I need somebody to make a motion to reconsider 14B so that we can make a motion to approve 2718S.
Madam Chair, I move to reconsider item 14B.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, we're voting to reconsider item 14B. Please vote. Urge a yes vote. Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
That item is going to be reconsidered. We are now at agenda item number 14B, AR 2017-18. I need a motion to approve the substitute version. Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair, the S version.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. May I have a second, please? Thank you. Please vote to approve the S version of this item. Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
That item is approved. We're now,
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome, sir. We're now back to item number 14H, AR 2017-37, a resolution appropriating an amount not to exceed $114,822.50 for payment of bond issuance costs. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Thank you. There's no one in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
There's one more person that didn't vote. Thank you. That item is approved. We're now at agenda item 14I, AR 2017-36, appropriating contributions from the Area-wide General Fund 2016 operating budget for continuation of projects. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Thank you. May I have a second, please? Thank you. No one's in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
That item is approved. We are now on agenda item 14J, AR 2017-30, use of eminent domain and acceptance of decisional documents for the construction of Yosemite Drive upgrade Eagle River Loop to Yellowstone Drive. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. Mr. Trainee.
Madam Chair, move to postpone indefinitely. They've reached agreement on this, so we do
Second.
not need this vehicle.
Thank you. Okay, great.
Don't need it.
All right. There's no one in the queue. Please vote to postpone indefinitely this item. Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Somebody didn't vote to postpone indefinitely? We're missing one. Here we go. Thank you. That item is postponed indefinitely. We are now at agenda item 14K, AO 2715, to create a process and standards for mergers of two or more community councils. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
May I have a second, please? We're stuck. Give us a minute, please. Yeah. Anybody here to help us? Well, okay, let's have a voice vote on this item. Item 14K. Would you take a voice vote so we can move on, Madam Clerk? Thank you.
Ms. Dabowski?
Yes.
Mr. Croft?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Chair Gray Jackson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Starr? Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That item is approved. I think we may be okay now. We are now at agenda item 14L.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Flynn.
I think this is considered general enough, but as you are aware, the company in which I have an investment interest has filed for a dispensary license with the state of Alaska and would appreciate a ruling on whether I have a conflict on this specific ordinance.
I don't think it's a conflict on this. I really don't.
Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Gray Jackson. I can't even talk. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I'm going to elevate you to president in a second. Okay, Mr. Flynn, you threw me for that one. Mr. Flynn, does the item before us have any substantial financial or personal interest in your view?
I don't think so, no.
And Mr. Flynn, just for the record, the reason you had been excluded prior is because you own a facility that may be permitted for cultivation and or retail. Is that correct?
I own a piece of a facility that is fully permitted for cultivation. We have submitted
What do you want to do?
an application for a retail facility.
Okay.
Okay, and Mr. Flynn, it's my understanding from the body's previous action that the reason that you were excluded from participation there is because this is a new industry and there may be some perceived benefit by the body of you voting on other people's licenses because they're so new, but the body has yet to take any stand as far as the rules and letting you participate with the rules. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Let me see. I'm looking for my questions, Ms. Gray Jackson. Oh, there they are. Mr. Flynn, will your participation in this substantially benefit you or directly create any benefit for your business should it get up and going?
I don't believe so. My understanding of state law is you can't actually offer a discount under any circumstances. So to me, this is yet another belt to a set of suspenders that's already in place.
All right. Madam Chair, it doesn't appear that Mr. Flynn, with the content of the information in front of us, will possess any sort of benefit from participating in the formation of the rules regarding discounts if there is a acceptance by the body. So in my particular view, not that it matters, but that's where you have it.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Yes, it does matter, and thank you for asking the questions. And the chair rules that Mr. Flynn can participate in this. Item 14L, AO 2716, to prohibit marijuana establishments from offering or advertising a military discount to any individual in the status of active duty, guard, or reserves in the United States military. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Here. Good evening, sir. Welcome. Please state your name and spell your last.
Good evening. My name's Ed Larrivee, L-A-R-R-I-V is victory, E-E-2. I think after Vietnam, you know, they can smoke in other countries. And they do. They actually do. And for us to limit or punish people that serve in our military, you know, this is a slap in the face. I mean, they can do it in Vietnam and they can't do it here in their own country? What are we coming to? I think what we should do is give our military a break and allow this, because it's the change of the times. This stuff's accepted in our society now. It's not 1968 or 1970. It's 2017. We have to get over our discretion of hurting our military and treating them unfairly. I mean, I'm proud of our military. And for us to just say, oh, well, you can't have that discount, but this guy over here can because he has a special permission. We need to think about helping our military out get equal rights instead of punishing them. All this will eventually change in about 3 years, I imagine, where Congress will realize this stuff's not, it's not taboo. As it was in 1937, we need to think about this, That's my point of view.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Trainee.
Thank you.
Sir, just to let you know, the reason we're doing this is because these people are subject to the UCMJ rules, which are completely different than the rules you live by.
I know.
They agreed when they came into federal military service to live by that code.
I know.
And what happens is, if they're caught using marijuana, they're discharged. They lose their BA benefits. They lose any retirement benefits. So this is to protect them from falling into a trap. I dealt with so many people, and I was discharging people from the military that are on the wrong side of this issue. And Congress has to change the law.
Yeah,
and I
they
doubt
do.
Seriously, with Sessions as Attorney General, that will happen. We'll see.
I hope.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Thank you, sir. Have a good evening. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say I really appreciate the spirit with which this was brought forward, particularly Mr. Dunbar. I know he, as a member of the Guard and Reserves, does a yeoman's work looking out for our military personnel in this community and looking after their best interests. And to that end, this is, on its face, a pretty good idea. However, as I mentioned in my disclosure, this sort of discount is already prohibited under state law, and should the federal government ever remove its collective head from its collective anyway, and provide some of the cannabis products as a reasonable treatment of pain or PTSD. I would hate for Anchorage to have this on the books and force us to go through all the steps to repeal it in order to provide that opportunity to our servicemen and women. I was probably going to vote yes on this just because it would be easier. But Mr. Larrabee made some good points, and so I think I'm going to oppose it. And part of it is I was doing a little reminiscing the other day, and one of the comments I made to myself was, it's easier, when in doubt, vote no, because it's way easier to redo than undo. So I appreciate the sentiment. Mr. Dunbar, I really appreciate your efforts to look out for our servicemen and women. Mr. Trainee, yourself as well. I know your history with the armed services. But I just think we're not being fair to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Ms. Dombowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. See, it does happen. I'm going to agree with Mr. Flynn again. But for some different reasons. First of all, Mr. Larrabee, this code, what Mr. Trainee has attempted to do, does not prohibit military members from using marijuana. The fact of the matter is, if they use marijuana, they could be discharged because it is illegal under federal law, and they work for the federal government. So under the UCMJ, the rules that they're governed by, they can't use marijuana. So that's where we're at. Now, I'm going to oppose this for a different reason. Number one, I do believe Mr. Flynn and I have the same view that this is redundant. It's already illegal under state law. They can't offer discounts, so it's already illegal under state law. But secondly, I actually represent the largest contingent of both active duty and retired military in the state of Alaska. I do represent JBEAR, and I actually was contacted by a number of soldiers who were kind of offended by this. One guy said to me, "Do you really think we're that stupid? Like, do you really need to make special rules for us to protect ourselves?" I didn't think of it that way. When I first thought this, I thought it was kind of innocuous, to be honest with you. But his argument did sway me, and it did show me that the men and women that serve in uniform, they know the rules, they respect the rules, they follow the rules, and they don't need to be put in a padded room so politicians can protect them from themselves. And I have enough great respect for the residents of the military to know they are competent, able-bodied men and women, and should they decide to go down this path, they know exactly what they're getting into. So I don't feel we need to treat them with kid gloves. So, I think Mr. Flynn's argument, though, of the fact that this is just redundant and it's not necessary, weighs the most with me, and I will not be supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, am not in support. I was in the military. My son is currently in the military. My wife was in the military. Our parents were in the military. We have a long and proud tradition of being very pro-military in my family, but I agree that this ordinance is just paternalistic. It's what I hate seeing government do. We're just kind of reaching out there. There's no evidence that anybody's going to offer military discounts. It's prohibited under state law already, but yet we're going to just create another ordinance on the books that stops something that's really not a problem. And I agree with Ms. Dombowski that the service members know their obligations and know the restrictions and are smart enough to stay away from what's going to get them in trouble. And if they would be swayed from that by a discount at a marijuana store in order to risk their career, then they probably should be weeded out anyway. So I do appreciate Mr. Dunbar and Mr. Trainey's desire to protect our military. I just think this is a very too paternalistic way to do it. And so Mr. Flynn, Mr. Larrabee, Ms. Dombowski, and I will all be on the same side of this one.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Trainey?
Thank you. There's a sign as you pull into Elmendorf Air Force Base, or JBEAR, call it what you want, that says no marijuana allowed. And periodically they do spot inspections on cars coming onto base. So what happens when your car is inspected and there's marijuana there? You go into the whole military court system. This protects the military. And you tell me it's paternalistic, it's not. I dealt with so many young military people. It's the first time out of their family. They're here and they see a discount. Hey, that's a good idea. We want to make sure they don't destroy their career. That's all this does. It helps them. And believe me, I've spent a lot of time with people that got on the wrong side of this, having to visit them at Cook Inlet pretrial. It's not a good situation. So I'm voting yes on this.
Thank you, Mr. Trainey. Mr. Croft?
Can I ask Erica McConnell what the prohibition is on the state law on discounts? No discounts? Is this covered? Is it specifically military, or just they prohibit discounts in general?
Through the chair, Mr. Croft, this issue, I think, is addressed in two places in state code. One, that a licensed retail marijuana store may not offer or deliver to a consumer as a marketing promotion or for any other reason free marijuana or marijuana product, including a sample, free. And that a retail marijuana store may not use giveaway coupons as promotional materials or conduct promotional activities such as games or competitions to encourage sale of marijuana or marijuana products. So,
give me the first part. Just I got the giveaway, and then of the second one you read, the first section of it.
May not use giveaway coupons as promotional materials or conduct promotional activities such as games or competitions to encourage sale of marijuana or marijuana products. So I am not familiar with a place, and granted, I don't know the state code as well as I know the local code, but I'm not familiar with a place that prohibits discount sales, that sort of thing.
With the language you read us, it seems to you can't give it away You can't do giveaway coupons, and you can't do a game sort of giveaway.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well, just speak real briefly then. I surrounded by people who made good points on it, but I do think without being paternalistic, it's just a bad idea to have these. As a young service member, you might you know the prohibition, but we're in such a strange world now with a federal prohibition and states that have allowed it, and to see come new to Alaska and see a military discount could be confusing, and it has such dramatic consequences for somebody that I think it's a poor idea to have this discount. I think we ought to be clear that you should not. I hope nobody would be confused even if we had it, but if they are, it really has horrible consequences for them, and I'd prefer we didn't create a trap that has such bad results for our servicemen. So I don't mean it in a condescending way. I know you know your rules better than I do. We're talking not about, Mr. Larrabee, not about what the federal government does. They're going to do what they're going to do. This is preventing us from creating a trap. Whether anyone would fall into it, I don't know, but I don't want to have the trap out there, so I'll vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To me, it may be paternalistic, but it's like advertising alcohol to underage kids. It's setting a trap, as Mr. Croft says. It doesn't cost us anything, but it may protect somebody in the military. So I will be voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was a little bit frustrated. I'd hoped to get in the queue a little bit earlier because I think I could have cleared up some of what I think are misconceptions. Mr. Larrabee's point about Congress and the desire to have Congress change that law, I actually agree with him, which is why, A1B, the section here, has a sunset clause. And we specifically put a sunset clause in here. So if the Department of Defense or Congress changes this policy without further action, to go to Mr. Flynn's point, without further action, our ordinance will sunset. When I listen to Ms. McConnell talk about the prohibitions that exist in state law, I don't think it covers this. And even if it did, speaking to Mr. Flynn again, as he knows, we do things like, for example, pass a property tax ordinance that's contingent on action of the state. So we pass our own laws as well. With regard to the question about it being paternalistic, I can speak from my experience as a judge advocate. I deal on both sides, both prosecution and defense, with cases involving substances. And I have gotten many questions about marijuana, and I think it is very much unsettled right now because of the difference between federal law and state law. And so we have people that move here from out of state and see that it's legal and have some confusion there. We also have people that are in the Guard here that ask me questions about, can I have it in my house? Can my wife work in a marijuana store? We get those kind of questions. I do think there's confusion there, and I do think this potentially, I could very easily envision a case where a defense attorney, or, well, the equivalent of that, a judge advocate, would use the existence of a discount like this in a case. And I want us to avoid that. And I'll say that in speaking with people from the industry, they assure me that they weren't planning on doing this anyway, which I appreciate, but I'd like to be a little more certain. And if this passes, they don't have to do anything additional. They don't have to post any signs, or they don't have to do any kind of card check. We're not asking them to affirmatively stop people from the military from purchasing it. We're just saying they don't have to go out of their way, or we're forbidding them from going out of their way to target discounts at service members. I appreciate the discussion. I know where people are coming from. I've gotten comments from both sides. I've got people, officers, and others reach out to me and say it's a good idea. I've had some express what was expressed to Ms. Demboski. Ultimately, I think it's It's a sort of a common sense action, and because it doesn't affect veterans, I mean, it affects people that are currently in the military, it doesn't affect veterans, and it has a sunset clause, I think it's well crafted, and I hope that we support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. You weren't forgotten. I was just following the cue, so thank you very much. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I did mention in my earlier comments that both my wife and I were in the military, and I was remiss in not mentioning we met in the military, and it was 36 years ago tonight on Valentine's Day. And since I'm not there, I thought I'd give her a shout out for that.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Congratulations. Mr. Peterson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Dunbar, for bringing this forward. He has experiences in adjudicating cases in the military that I don't have the opportunity to observe, and so I'm going to trust his judgment and that he feels that this is important, and I'm going to back him up on that, so I'll be a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. There is no one else in the queue. We're voting on the motion. Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
Mr. Starr.
Yes.
Thank you. Somebody's missing. Yes. Okay, thank you. That item is approved. We are now at agenda item 14M, AO 2017-14, an ordinance amending the zoning map, rezoning approximately 3.9 acres from R3, Section 28, Lot 40 East, 198 feet. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Wow. Hello. Welcome.
Happy Valentine's
Flash.
Day, Madam Chair. My name is Tim Potter with Dowell, representing Providence Alaska Medical Center and Legacy LLC, the owner of the property tonight. Providence is requesting a rezone of approximately 3.95 acres located at the northwest corner of Piper and Tudor Road. Piper Street is a collector street with enhanced pedestrian improvements, its length, and Tudor is on the National Highway System and identified and designated as an arterial in our road system. It's a good place to have heavier traffic, and there happens to be a bus stop directly adjacent to this property fronting on Tudor Road. The request for the rezone is from R3 to RO as indicated by the chair, and the proposed rezone is conformance with the University Medical District Plan, which the city spent and the community spent about 2.5 to 3 years processing and reviewing, and the Assembly adopted it March 8th of last year as Ordinance 2015-140. So actually it says 2015. Anyway, so a year ago, as an adopted directive and an element of our comprehensive plan. The case packet prepared by the Municipal Planning Department has gone through and recommended approval, and in their review and analysis indicated that all of the prerequisite standards that are required in code to be granted a rezone had been met. Providence develops, operates, and maintains facilities at the highest level. I'd put their operation and maintenance up against anyone's in town. They are a vested, active, interested party in not only the neighborhood but the community as a whole. And their development and continued growth of the medical industry servicing not just Anchorage but the entire state of Alaska is crucial, and it is one of our largest employment centers. We'd appreciate your support, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Steele.
Yes. The arguments I've heard against it is some neighborhood folks concerned about traffic increases there at that particular intersection. Have you guys looked at that or addressed that issue one way or another?
We have looked at it, and prior to any development or issuance of a building permit as required, if the development will change the underlying traffic by 10% or greater on the peak hour, which in this case would be the evening peak, and/or 100 trips or more, it has to have a full traffic impact analysis done. And then if there's mitigation required to bring it into context, there can be additional improvements required. There can be limitations on the amount of square footage of the development or types of uses, hours of operations, to make it work and not be a problem for the community.
May I?
Certainly.
Right now it's undeveloped. I mean, it's using for storage and that type of things. The concern evidently is not that which is generated by it, but the fact that they would be coming and going out of that street and that parking lot onto Tudor, and that a high speed and a low speed meeting does not necessarily mesh. Is that anything that would spur that type of look at it from a traffic point of view?
Well, what's really interesting, Providence probably has more at stake in this than most. When you look at the issue of the trip generation and where the cars are going and what speed they're going, there is a trend in healthcare to decentralize a little bit. And specifically in Providence's case, as a hospital facility grows, it starts as a certain size, and they have the core functions of surgery in the hospital beds and that in the core. And then they develop services around that. As that continues to grow, they need to add specific hospital services, the key things, to the core. So they move things out. And I don't know if you've ever played the game that's a little deal with tiles on it, and one of them is missing, and you have to spell a word or make a picture by moving the little things around, and you only have one hole. This piece of property is a hole in that game board. As the hospital has to add, as they're adding now, I think 13 emergency rooms to the core of the hospital, they have to move services out of the core to somewhere. Sure. This piece of property will be one of those parcels that some of those services that are currently in an old, in fact, the original medical office building on campus, will likely move. Now, the reality is, whether that service is in the hospital itself or on the perimeter, if traffic has to go to the hospital to get there, all that traffic's going all the way through the neighborhood. Whereas if it's placed at the perimeter on Tudor Road, where there's trail access and bus access, the hope is that there'll be a greater usage of those alternative ways and will intercept the cars on the national highway system rather than pulling all those cars all the way through the neighborhood. So it's actually, in my view, a benefit.
Yeah, I think they could probably mitigate it by offering free hospital care for any accidents on that particular corner. But I will be voting for it.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Weddleton?
Did I understand you to say that there would be a major site plan review required for this? Did you say that already?
Pardon?
Is a major site plan review required for development on this spot?
There is, on this piece of property, there is not a major site plan review requirement. Okay. The hospital and the campus area from 40th Avenue up to Providence has a master plan and has design standards, and as long as it's on that portion of the campus, then it goes through an administrative site plan review.
Okay. And one more question.
Certainly, Mr. Weddleton.
Now, my understanding, they would never be able to exit onto Tudor Road, would they? Would be onto Piper and then onto Tudor?
DOT will never allow a driveway. In fact, there's a plat note on that piece of property that prohibits direct access onto Tudor Road.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening.
Good evening.
Please state your name and spell your last.
My name is Paul Stang, S-T-A-N-G. I'm president of the University Area Community Council. I'd like to give you a copy.
Thank you.
Of my comments. The Assembly needs to take the lead in assuring more housing capacity, especially as a mix of commercial and development housing, commercial development and housing, excuse me. Rezoning must be done in conformance with the land use plan map, but requests for rezoning from R3 to RO seem too often to lead to new office space but no associated housing. The R part of RO gets dropped out. This results in more vehicle traffic, more parking lots, and more commuting. If associated housing were part of a commercial office development, people could walk and bike to work, diminishing the need for parking and commuting, and making a more environmentally sound neighborhood. This is a strong trend in most cities, but unfortunately not in Anchorage. The Muni should take steps to promote development that contains a combination of office space and housing at every opportunity. This specific case failed before the Planning and Zoning Commission by a vote of 5 against to 3-4. I presume you have the minutes and the objections that were raised. If you do not, or were not given those, I have a copy, and I would be pleased to give you them because I think the commission members who opposed this raised some excellent points, only one of which was raised so far. While the UACC values and generally supports Providence, we have a problem with a simple change from R3 to RO in this particular case. The UACC would support a change to RO zoning if the development included at least a minimum number of dwelling units per acre attached to the new zoning designation. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no questions. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you. There is no one in the queue. Mr. Weddleton.
Sorry. You know, I just, I will support this rezone, but having been on the Planning Commission for long enough, I really have qualms against going against the Planning Commission's decision. So the thing that puzzles me in looking through this is that, you know, I do think this is in conformance with the fairly new UMed district plan. It's less than a year old, and I understand that things are losing housing and so on, but we should follow our plans, and I know those plans go through extensive amount of public review, so I will support it largely based on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at, looking at page 1142 in the bottom of the half under A, and the Commission found several different facts that are listed there, and they're exceptionally worried about additional traffic. They're saying this would be a tremendous traffic generator. And I saw the presentation at the University Community Council a couple of months ago, and one of the main talking points from members of the Community Council was that they're asking to have this changed to RO and that they don't expect that there actually will be any housing built with the RO designation. And I'm wondering, Mr. Potter, do you know, do they have any plans of building any mixed use with this, or there might be people living upstairs and offices downstairs at all?
Well, that's a great question. There is no specific project designed for this piece of property. However, let me put on another hat, Vice Chair of the Live, Work, Play Housing Committee. We have done, and we've shared with the Assembly some of the information that we've received, and I know that the administration is aware of it, that we have an issue in town that there is about a 30 to 40% financial gap in the feasibility of multifamily residential. Yes, in other communities that have significant populations, like Seattle, Portland, that with the dynamics of 20 or 30 cranes in a booming construction environment, it's different. It's very difficult to add and require residential as a component of what is already a very spendy, because it's likely going to be a medical office building, which has diagnostic information, diagnostic systems, all kinds of things like clinic space, which already raise the price of the facility. For instance, if this were maxed out at 100,000 square feet, it would probably be about a $54 million project. Very expensive. If you start putting residential as a requirement on that, all you do is add a financial burden that can't ever be caught up with. You don't make it up with volume, you just increase that gap. Now, that's a big problem that the Liverpool Play Housing Committee is trying to identify and work with and figure out how to do this. But you also have to consider that the UMed district, and if you look at the growth items in the economy at being tourism and healthcare, it is the University Medical District. There is housing. We don't want to shoot the golden goose, basically, that's creating jobs and a lot of good high-paying jobs. And the Assembly, contrary to comment, did address the issue. The other residential areas adjacent to this area were recommended for and adopted for increased density. And that is how the Assembly addressed it. And the neighborhood is ripe for redevelopment to occur over the coming years. It's a neighborhood that doesn't have adequate streets, it doesn't have adequate drainage, it doesn't have walkways, all kinds of things. So there will need to be some infrastructure there. But Mr. Peterson, all I can say is that until someone figures out how to fill that gap, or the gap gets smaller, you're likely to see, not just in this case, but it being extremely difficult to add residential to commercial or office buildings in this town. Unfortunate, but true.
All right. Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thank you. Mr. Franny? Is that a question?
I'll be supporting this. You and I represent that area. We need to have this building in there. There are some streets over there still have traders on them, and that area is going to be developed. We need to have this there to provide jobs. When I take a look at the forecast for this state, it says the largest growth will be in healthcare industry. We need to support that, and that's what this does, Madam Chair. I'll be voting yes on this.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Mbosky and then Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Mbosky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. I think this is a great example of why the Assembly is the final arbiter on many of these discussions. The Planning and Zoning Commission, while they do yeoman's work, and I frankly think they're underappreciated by some, ultimately this is an Assembly decision, and their recommendations, their decisions often are just recommendations to the Assembly. And the Assembly has a responsibility to look at the whole city, to understand how the whole city should develop, and to understand issues in more of a holistic fashion versus the very specific details that P&Z is looking at. So while I appreciate their comments, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right conclusion that they've come to for the best interests of the municipality of Anchorage as a whole. I look at the staff comments. If you look at your page, it's page 1145, starting with the staff comments. And there's a couple of things that I just want to hit home because Mr. Weddleton talked about it. The Long Range Planning Department agrees that the rezone is consistent with the UMed district plan adopted by the Assembly on March 8th, 2016. So this is consistent with the UMed plan. Because the UMed district plan identifies this particular property for low-intensity office, long-range planning supports the proposed rezone. So consistently, they keep going in saying, is this consistent with this area, and what recently the community has said they want to see. The proposed rezoning to RO will allow for development that is consistent with the UMed district plan. The property being identified in the UMed district plan, it talks about the appropriate transition. And this is the part that I think is really important. this particular area, and this was in their final conclusion from the from the staff analysis, the rezoning is compatible with the existing residential and commercial land uses surrounding the petitioner site. The area along Piper is intended to serve as a transition between intense commercial users and residential neighborhoods. And I don't think that should be overlooked. I think it's really important when you're talking about how you develop to not have heavy industrial and then bam, right next to it, all this residential. So when you look at it from a holistic standpoint and you step back and look, it makes sense to have a transitional zone, maybe of medical offices, law offices, something like that. And so when I look at this area, I'm considering the UMed plan, but I'm considering just common sense, right? And I think whenever you put heavy industrial or commercial, any of those types of things right up against residential, that's usually where you're going to have problems. So I like the idea of the transitional zone, and I think that's a way to bridge those two areas. I'll be supporting this. I think it makes sense, and when we read the staff comments, I just fundamentally am looking at this from a different way than the Planning and Zoning Commission did, and I think this will fit the area, and I think it'll serve the area, frankly. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be a little bit more brief, but I've given this one a lot of thought. I don't technically represent that area, but I do attend that community council, and the neighborhood has brought forward legitimate concerns, and it bothers me that there is no residential here, residential planned, and I do think the traffic impacts are significant, and I do think that it's unusual that P&Z would reject in this fashion. But that all being said, first, I tend to defer to the person who does represent the neighborhood. In this case, it's you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Trainee. This is compatible with the UMed district plan, and as Ms. Domboski has just laid out, the planning staff also agrees with this. So I think it's a close call, but I intend to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
That item is approved unanimously. We are now at agenda. Mr. Trainee?
I want to change the order of the day. Take up item 14Q first. This is a marijuana manufacturing establishment. Mr. Flynn has no business interest related to that, so it'd be good to have him weigh in on this before you get in the other ones.
Great. May I have a second, please? Thank you. Any objection to changing the order of the day? Mr. Dunbar?
No objection.
Mr. Starr? Seeing no objection, we're now at item 14Q. AR 2017-49, a resolution approving a marijuana license and special land use permit doing business as Mamo's Bakery. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Would you like to speak, sir? Oh, okay. Oh, would anyone like to speak? Okay. Seeing and hearing none?
Move to approve.
Public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
We discussed this at last week's Community and Economic Development Committee, and we recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. There is no one else. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just need to ask Mr. Weddleton, because I don't have my notes from my meeting. Is this one of the ones where we had to amend something to add the camera in the hallway?
Not on this one, I don't think.
Did you guys have the camera issue? Oh, it was them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Domboski. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote on AR 2017-49, Mamo's Bakery. Please vote. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
That item is approved. We're now back to Mr. Flynn. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Dismissal on Valentine's Day.
Okay.
You planned it this way, didn't you?
Great. Have a good evening, Mr. Flynn. We're now at agenda item 14N, AR 2017-46, a resolution approving a marijuana license and special land use permit for Uncle Herbs. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
Well, and also we also discussed this carefully at the Community and Economic Development Committee on last week, and I recommend approval with the conditions stated.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Starr.
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
That item is approved. We are now at Agenda Item 14O, AR 2747, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving a marijuana license and special land use permit, doing business as Alaska Sense, LLC. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Would you like to be heard, sir? Oh, great.
Are you the applicant?
Seeing and hearing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Training?
Is the applicant here on this one? Come on forward. Don't be shy, please.
We had a first and second, right?
Any comments or questions or?
This is Smadara Warden. She's the applicant and licensee. My name's Evan Neal, the COO of the company, and we're just very thankful to be at this place with you all and finally be able to.
Okay, has the process worked all right for you so far?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Weddleton, you can have a seat. Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
This was reviewed by the Community and Economic Development Committee, and we recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Mr. Starr? Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Thank you. That item is approved. We are now at Agenda Item 14P, AR 2017-48, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving a marijuana license and special land use permit, doing business as Alaska Herb Garden. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
This was also, we recommended this for approval after careful review, and this one does include the addition of another camera, and that is one of the conditions stated in the.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
One other person didn't vote. Thank you. Thank you. That item is approved. We are now at audience participation. Anyone wish to be heard? Good evening. Please state your name, spell your last.
Good evening. My name is Ron Alleva, A-L-L-E-V-A. I'm going to recommend a bigger clock, but I'm here tonight in recognition of Black History Month and also the naming of the Transit Center after Mr. Parks. In the previous 3 years, I appeared before the Assembly to request that a plaque or an acknowledgement of some nature be given to Rosa Parks, who was here in Anchorage and rode the bus system. I was on that bus with Miss Parks, and her important place in our nation's history and a change that one bus ride can make should be acknowledged. And permanently, whether it be renaming a bus route, renaming a bus stop, but the plaque should go in. The other thing is, I take this rather personally because of the recent protests where Black Lives Matter. My father was deaf in 1 year and couldn't be drafted, so he had to go to Detroit to work in a war factory. And in Detroit in 1943, part of Black history, but American history, one of the worst housing riots ever took place, and 43 people were killed, 25 Afro-Americans, and unfortunately, fighting the worst evil the world has known, these individuals were shot by the National Guard and our own American police force. So he locked himself in his room for 3 days, and being a dark-complected Italian immigrant, he feared for his life. Yet he peeked out the window and watched fellow Americans getting their heads smashed against curbings. So civil rights was important to him. Civil rights is important to myself, my family, and I think it should be acknowledged when someone makes a sacrifice like Rosa Parks, and we have the honor to have her ride one of our buses, if not have her presence in our city. I think it's important for us to recognize that, along with our own Mr. Parks, who I think you recognized earlier in the evening. So I'm going to request again, for the fourth time, that if it's necessary, I'll offer to purchase the plaque with a small acknowledgement that she was here and what a difference she made with one bus ride. Do you have any questions?
There are no questions. Thank you very much. Have a
All
good
right.
evening. Yeah. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Oh, no, I still have time. Can I go to part two?
You have 7 minutes.
7 minutes?
No,
I'll
no.
take it.
You had 7 seconds. Now it's over.
I want to wish you all a happy Valentine's
Thank
Day.
you very
And
much.
thank you for your service.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening. Please state your name and spell your last.
Hello, my name is Skylar Kingstrang. That's King-Strang. Some of you may recognize it from the emails that I send. That said, I am here to discuss a matter that's more state-focused than it is assembly-focused, but I did feel like it was important to bring the attention of the staff. With the various approvals of marijuana establishments, one of the things that I think is important to note is that for every one of these establishments, we end up with these public notices that are readily available online. I understand the purpose of it, but it also ends up listing personal email addresses as well as home addresses, and I feel like this is a matter of importance, especially to Mr. Flynn. One of the things that I think is especially important to note here is that due to the fact that banks are unwilling to take cash from these various establishments and people involved with them, that means that we're going to be dealing with businesses that are using primarily cash transactions. Therefore, so when we have these public notices, which are incredibly easy to find online, with Patrick Flynn's, you can look up his name plus marijuana, then you can find the name of his business. You can say his business plus public notice into Google. It'll be the first result there. Then you go down and you can find his home address there. Well, now we have a public listing of all of the addresses of people who are involved in these marijuana establishments, and they're publicly available online with almost no effort in order to find them. And I was just wondering if it is something that has come up before this assembly before, if it is something that our legislators are thinking about, and if it is, what kind of protections are going to be in place for members of the marijuana industry.
Thank you, sir. There are no questions. Thank you very much. Anyone, Mr. Trainee?
If you'll look on alcohol licenses, the same thing happens. With alcohol licenses, they're extremely detailed. You can find the address on everybody involved in alcohol license, too.
Okay, so that I understand that, but the big difference here is the fact that
they want consistency. I know your question deals with cash.
Right.
Because they transfer cash.
it just seems to be putting a giant target on the backs of members of this industry. And I understand that it's not something we're going to solve here at the Assembly, and I understand the idea is consistency. Huh?
It's a state issue, state requirement. It'll have to be addressed on the state side.
Okay, but I know I just don't have the ability to go in front of a state board and say the same thing. You are the closest thing I have.
Problem with the state legislature being in Juneau, isn't it?
Well, you know, there's that part, and there's the fact that when I send emails out, nobody responds to them. So
thanks for being here.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening.
Hello again.
Hello.
My name's Ed Larrivee, L-A-R-R-I-V in Victory EE-2. We need to figure out a way to offset the oncoming problem of studded tires. You know, $75 a tire in state tax, and they're saying this breaks up the roads. Well, so do trucks. Why don't we put a tax on them? You know, we need to think of a way so that your average working person won't have, that's on a budget, especially in this time of economical catastrophe, so that they can get to work without having to pay close to $300 per, for a car in taxes for tires. And by the way, these studded tires save lives. We got to think of a way to fix Juneau so that they know people are really unhappy with this. I mean, look how many cars you all own. Do you all really want to pay that? Maybe you guys are so rich that you can afford it. There's a lot of people that aren't, and they have to go to work. They're not going to take the bus, especially in a blizzard. They're going to jump in their car, and they're going to wreck because they can't get studded tires. Now myself, I own non-studs or studless tires. I've owned studded tires before too. Studded tires work better, and that's experience. We need to figure out a way to let Juneau know the people do not want an extra $75 tax per tire, per studded tire on their car. And hopefully you guys, you geniuses, will come up with the right idea and try to figure out a way so we're exempt from this. And that's what I'm praying for. Well, anyway, thank you all. You all have a safe night going home. Be careful. The roads are terrible still. They're all slushy. And have a great night.
Thank you. Mr. Trainee.
The state, I think, is coming to Anchorage this Saturday for a caucus here. You might want to check the state. I think they're going to LIO office on Saturday.
Where?
The LIO office, their new LIO office, not the old one. They're still being sued on that one.
Yeah.
It's a week from Saturday? 25th, he tells me, but they're going to be in town. So you can come and talk to them about Kathy Giesel's.
Yes, Kathy Diesel.
We had a lady a few years ago, a state legislator, that wanted to make toothbrushing in school mandatory, and that was hung around her neck for years, so this one should be with Kathy, too.
Oh, yes.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Ms. Kaufman, can you come to the podium, please? Hi.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for still being here with us tonight. We have another Tradition Tuesday that has happened upstairs. I'm sorry that you all missed it. You missed some fantastic dancing and food. But I would love to have our group of some of our local South Sudanese community members. And just so you know, this group here are Nuer speakers. There's several different languages. And how many tribes did you say, Nakor? 64 tribes. So do you all want to come up very quickly? And you can also see the outfits that they performed in tonight. Thank you for allowing us to come down here. It's great for them to get a chance to see our assembly.
And maybe everybody can just state their name.
Yep, you can state your name.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Deng Badeng. I'm a student in Alaska Bible College, and I major missionary emphasis. And that's my name. I'm from Southern Sudan. Yeah.
Hello.
My name is Nyakor Mading Kwith. I'm one of the community organizers with this event.
Come on, everybody.
Hi, my name is Kurak Garkot Turuk. I'm working at Hope Community.
Hi, my name is Shol Klang. I work in M&M industry distributor.
My name is Peter Gadluak. I'm from Sudanese. Not problem.
My name is Nyabos Luak. I am from Nuer community.
Hello, my name is Rhoda. I'm from Sudan.
Hi, my name is Martha Bell. I'm South Sudanese lady to do culture.
Hello, my name is Nail Wakshan. I'm
from South Sudanese, and I'm one of the 4NN singers. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Reese, and I'm South Sudanese community, and I'm with this group, and then we have to teach our children how to dance, to do the culture, everything. So, but they don't know anything about the culture, so we try to encourage them to know, to speak our language, and thank you for seeing you tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Naikan Chil. I'm from South Sudanese. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Nyela Adeo, Sudanese community. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Nike Jul, Sudanese community. Thank
you.
Hi, my name is Gabriel Smanichoks, owner of West Coast Mobile Tech Services in Northern Light and Boniface. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And Amy, thank you for your work on this project. It's just pretty amazing. Yeah. Anyone else wish to be heard? Any assembly comments? Just a reminder, everybody, we have the Homeless Committee tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and it's a committee of the whole, and I look forward to seeing everyone there. May I have a motion to adjourn,
Move to
please?
adjourn, Madam Chair.
Second, thank you. Meeting is adjourned.